Norman Podhoretz is editor-at-large of Commentary magazine. His latest book is World War IV, The Long Struggle Against Islamofascism. Fareed Zakaria is editor of Newsweek International. His latest book is The Future of Freedom, Illiberal Democracy at Home and Abroad. You wrote over the summer that if Iran is to be prevented from going ahead with a nuclear program, then the United States has no alternative but to strike against Iran. Do you still believe that, and if so, why?
Oh, very much so. Well, for over 4 years, diplomacy has been tried, first by the Europeans and then with some American participation, and all they've accomplished, these negotiations, is to buy the Iranians more time with which to move forward inexorably toward a nuclear capability. So that leaves us with only one terrible choice, which is either to bomb those facilities and retard their program, or even cut it off altogether, or allow them to go nuclear.
Well, there is a third choice, Judy, which is the choice we have used for pretty much every other country that has developed nuclear weapons, and that is deterrence. It used to be that one had to explain deterrence to the left. It has now become something the right does not understand. You know, Mao Zedong was a much more revolutionary figure than Ahmadinejad is. China was actively helping insurgencies all over the world that were anti-American, killing Americans in Vietnam, in Korea. Mao spoke actively about his great desire to overturn the international system. He even talked about destroying half the world to allow communism to triumph. And yet, you know what? The desire for self-preservation meant that Mao Zedong was deterred, the Soviet Union was deterred, North Korea is being deterred. We have a policy that we understand. I think that the onus surely must be on the other side to explain to us why, because Iran might gain the knowledge to make nuclear weapons in the next 3 to 5 to 8 years, we should launch a unilateral American invasion. This would be the third invasion of a Muslim country that the United States would have undertaken in the last 5 years. That seems to me a pretty serious business.
First, I want to say that I think the attitude expressed by Fareed Zakaria represents an irresponsible complacency that I think is comparable to the denial in the early 30s of the intentions of Hitler that led to what Churchill called an unnecessary war involving millions and millions of deaths that might have been averted if the West had acted early enough. The reason deterrence can't work with Iran is that there's a different element involved here than was involved with either Mao or even Kim Jong-il or Stalin, and that is the element of religious fanaticism. The fact of the matter is that with a religious fanatic like Ahmadinejad and the malacracy ruling Iran generally, there's no assurance that self-preservation or the preservation of the nation will deter them.
So the question about Iran's rationality rests on this. They've been in power for 30 years. What have they done? Iran has followed a pretty rational, national interest-oriented foreign policy. If you look at the way in which they opposed al-Qaeda and the Taliban, this was another Islamic revolutionary movement. You'd think that they would find them sympathetic, but no, they were the sworn enemies of al-Qaeda, and they helped the United States depose the Taliban.
All right,
the Iranians have, by and large, over the last 30 years, been fairly calculating. They have followed their national interest. When it has bumped up against the United States, they have worked against us. When they have thought that our interests were in common, as in Afghanistan, they've worked with us.
And
you know, similar arguments were made about Hitler in the early 30s, and it appalls me that this kind of attitude can still prevail after what we should have learned from the words of despots. Let me quote Ahmadinejad. "Thanks to the blood of the martyrs, a new Islamic revolution has arisen. The era of oppression, hegemonic regimes, and tyranny and injustice has reached its end. The wave of the Islamic revolution will soon reach the entire world, and that is a world," he says, without America and without Israel.
Look, if you look at what the way in which the mullahs have run Iran, by and large, they have been incredibly savvy. But the idea that they are not going to be deterred by Israel's 200 nuclear weapons, including a second strike capacity on submarines, is just fantasy. It's based on plucking a few quotes here and there from a president who is not constitutionally or operationally in charge of the nuclear program.
Podhoretz, do you think that, as you wrote a few months ago, this administration, this president intends, before he leaves office, to strike Iran?
Yes, I do believe he will, because he has said many times, or at least 2 times that I know of in public, that if we allow Iran to get the bomb, people 50 years from now will look back at us the way we look back at the men who made the Munich Pact with Hitler in 1938 and say, how could they have let this happen? Well, unlike Fareed Zakaria and the foreign policy establishment that is complacent and irresponsible, in my opinion, I think the president recognizes the danger. I think he knows that the time is short, the time is not on our side, and I think he will take military action, not an invasion, but airstrikes before he leaves office.
I believe in just the way that we have deterred the Soviet Union, Mao's China, Kim Jong-il. History will prove that we can use deterrence and containment to contain the problem of Iran, and that we do not need to launch a third unilateral invasion just to do that.